Welcome to Planet People, a podcast that aims to inspire curiosity and cultivate a deeper connection with the natural world.
We are thrilled to be sharing stories with you that highlight the beauty and importance of protecting our planet's wildlife.
Be sure to follow us on social media and your favorite podcast streaming platform so that you never miss an episode. Hey, Planet People. Let's jump right into today's episode. Coral, what would you say is your breath of fresh air?
Yeah, we haven't done a breath of fresh air in a long time, I feel like, on the episodes.
No, you're right. We really haven't. We used to kind of start out some of our other episodes this way, and we're bringing it back for 2026, a breath of fresh air.
It's ironic because I've been so sick this past week. I've spent so much time indoors, so I honestly don't really have a breath of fresh air in nature. But I will say that even though I've been a little sick, I still have to take my dog out here and there. And I think yesterday I was taking him out, and as soon as I walked out, I saw like our resident red-tailed hawk kind of swoop by, and it was just like such a clear shot of him. And I got the underwing, and it just reminded me like, oh yeah, he's here too.
I love that. I
Yeah.
also feel like it was the perfect sign that you were meant to go for a walk and like spend time in nature, even if that is a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. What's yours?
Well, it's funny you mention red-tailed hawk. There's actually been a resident red-shouldered hawk kind of visiting my little block here. We have an empty lot next door that's looking super lush after all the rain. And he's been getting, or she can't really, you can't ID hawks based on sex, so I'll just say he or she, but he's been kind of hunting around in the lot next door and getting sort of mobbed by crows. Like other crows in the neighborhood will kind of alert other birds nearby that the hawk is around, and so there's kind of been some beefing,
Oh,
which is
so
entertaining.
why can't you identify a hawk?
Well, they're sexually dimorphic, which just means that you can't sex them based on just their coloration alone. But typically across all raptor species, females are actually bigger than the male. Even in eagles, in great horned owls, those apex raptors, where actually bald eagles and great horned owls will compete against each other, which is pretty badass. But yes, you can only tell the difference between a male and a female by the size, not the coloration. Which in other cases, for songbirds, for example, like you can tell the difference between a male and a female if the male has more like bright coloration or displays, things like that.
So are you saying the red-tailed hawk, like even if they're male or female, they're relatively the same size? That's why you can't tell?
I'm saying the females are always bigger than the male. So
Oh,
that's how you can tell the difference.
oh, I see.
Okay, so sexual dimorphism describes the distinct differences in appearance, size, coloration, or behavior between males and females of the same species. So again, sexual dimorphism does not just mean color, but you can't tell the difference between like a male or female hawk on color alone because they're birds of prey. So in this case, the sexual dimorphism describes like the distinct size differences between males and females, not necessarily like color or appearance alone.
So you're saying if you see like a one-off hawk, it's kind of hard to identify because there's not one nearby to kind of differentiate.
Right. Like you're not typically going to see a male and a female hawk perched on the same fence next to each other, right? But in that case, you would probably be able to tell the difference between a male and a female based on size, because in all birds of prey, the female is bigger than the male, and that's how you can tell the difference. But coloration alone will not be enough to know.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's actually, I'm really glad you asked because I think this could be like another fun way to start out our episodes. So.
Yeah.
Like share a breath of fresh air and something more like biology, fun fact related to what we're seeing outside and like maybe why it's happening, right?
I'm trying to think of a good segue. I'm just going to say let's fly into our topics for today. We have the Mojave Desert Land Trust on today. We have Kelly Herbinson, the executive director, and Patrick Emblidge. He is their plant conservation program manager. And this was a wonderful conversation and also just an incredible organization. I'm sure if you've spent any time in the California desert area, you have seen their signs.
They have a really major presence, I would say, across the high desert and in Yucca Valley. If you're ever driving towards Joshua Tree National Park, on your left side, if you're going towards the park from Palm Springs, like literally down 29 Palms Highway on the left hand side, you'll see a big sign that says MDLT, and they have like a pretty blue background and a sign pointing to their building. And I notice it every time I drive to Joshua Tree, if you're coming from like Palm Springs, Coachella Valley, and going up through Morongo Valley. But yeah, I I love everything about this episode and this mission that MDLT is so dedicated to.
So it's in the name, Mojave Desert Land Trust. Natalie, could you give me a lesson as well as our listeners? What exactly is a land trust? What does that mean?
Great question, Coral. Let's break it down. A land trust is a nonprofit organization which owns and manages lands and sometimes water. There are three types of land trusts, and in this case, the MDLT is a 501c3 environmental nonprofit. And MDLT, we'll reference Mojave Desert Land Trust as MDLT in this episode, is a really incredible nonprofit organization. And I love what they do to protect the California desert by conserving land, restoring habitat, and preserving native seeds. This is really important, this native seed aspect, because they're so focused on basically acquiring more land trusts, or you could also call them easement properties, conservation easements. These are acquired lands by MDLT that have perhaps been donated to them, or they've acquired them in some other way. And so once they acquire this land, it's really up to them to enact their vision. And I love their vision as well. And it includes dark night skies, clean air and water, broad views and vistas, and an abundance of native plants and animals. And the beauty in that is this vision can come to life when more land is protected. That's really at the root of wildlife conservation, of plant conservation, is making sure that we have protected habitat so that animals and plants can grow freely, move freely, and do what they're supposed to do. And they can't do that if most of this land is developed. And that's why MDLT is such an impressive land trust, because they actually haven't even been around for that long, but they've had such a tremendous impact on the Southern California high desert in terms of protecting millions of acres of land. And in just such a short amount of time is what I think is really impressive. I don't think I need to figure out when they were exactly founded, but I don't think it's been more than 30 years that they've been around, which is...
Yeah, we find out in this episode they actually are coming up on their 20-year anniversary.
That's right, which is very short in terms of having like a legacy as a nonprofit who has a great impact. Like you think of the Sierra Club or other massive land, well, the Sierra Club's not a land trust, but other massive nonprofits, like they've been around for a long time. But MDLT is relatively new in the conservation world, yet they've protected up to 26 million acres, which is super impressive.
Really incredible.
Or, sorry, not 120. Our service area spans 26 million acres across the Colorado Desert and the entire California portion of the desert. And I think it's important to paint a picture for you guys of, yeah, where MDLT is situated in terms of the land that they're acquiring. And if you're not familiar with the Southern California desert, they are based in Joshua Tree, but their work spans much further than that. And Joshua Tree is actually really, really unique in that the Colorado Desert and Mojave Desert converge in the park. So they have really diverse properties that they're protecting, and a unique part of the desert that really needs a lot of protection right now.
It's really incredible. We did this interview on Zoom, and so we were meeting them for the first time via Zoom. But I actually had the great honor of meeting Kelly in person not too long afterwards at Josh Jackson's reading that I met him at, which was so fun and wonderful. And he was selling his books, he was selling some art prints, and all of those proceeds went to Mojave Desert Land Trust.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's so sweet.
So Kelly was there, so I got to meet her, and it was just so nice to be in person with some Planet People community.
I should have gone. I
It's okay.
regretted not
The
going,
next,
but
the next one.
yeah, I just need to come up to LA. Well, I'll come up this week and see you, and we'll do
Yeah.
more recording. But that's so great you got to meet Kelly. I loved interviewing
Yeah.
Kelly and Patrick. It was such an informative conversation, but really just naturally flowing and super passionate.
I definitely learned a lot, so I hope you
Mhm.
guys do too.
Enjoy! Today we're talking about the Mojave Desert with two people who have dedicated their careers to protecting it. Kelly Herbinson, the executive director of the Mojave Desert Land Trust, and Patrick Emblidge, the organization's plant conservation manager. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having us.
having us.
We're so happy to have you guys here. So Kelly has spent over 20 years working in desert conservation. She's an expert in the Mojave Desert ecology with an extensive background in studying desert tortoise biology, as well as the complex challenges that they face with things like renewable energy and ecosystem protection. And Patrick is an ecologist who fell in love with arid landscapes while studying Gila monsters and really now works towards protecting the Mojave's most vulnerable plant species with the Mojave Desert Land Trust. So in this episode today, we'll explore two current urgent campaigns, mostly related to the Joshua Tree Conservation Coalition, as well as some ongoing projects in the desert concerning wildlife crossings and overall habitat connectivity as it relates to the Mojave Desert Land Trust mission. And so on that note, Patrick and Kelly, let's start broad. What is a land trust and why are they important for conservation?
Sure. Well, I will field that question. So, um, first of all, the Mojave Desert Land Trust has been around for about 19 years, which is actually not that long compared to a lot of our nation's land trusts. So, some of them have been around for 100 years. It's one of the first ways in the last 100 years that folks have thought about protecting our landscapes was by building these nonprofit land trusts to essentially acquire land and keep it into permanent protection. So there's land trusts all over our country focused on different regions to acquire properties and put permanent protections on them and manage them in perpetuity. So that's at its core what the Mojave Desert Land Trust does.
Well, you guys are I guess, seemingly new nonprofit, but I mean, your impact has been tremendous in the Mojave Desert. I mean, I see you guys' name all over there when I'm going on hikes and everything. So, I mean, you're doing an amazing job for just being 19 years old and happy almost 20-year anniversary.
Thank you. Yeah, we did grow quite large, quite fast in the grand scheme of things. So there's a lot of land trusts in our country that, own one parcel of land and have a couple of employees and they manage that parcel of land. And because of the nature of the desert ecosystem, so we work throughout the California desert region, which is a quarter of the state of California. I think because of the nature of the desert, that the land is relatively inexpensive and there's a lot of it. And just our success in building a model that's really sustainable to acquire and protect land, we've been able to build and build and build and build. And now we've protected over 127,000 acres since our inception. And it is a little bit wild, but we have, dozens of escrows going at any given point. We close on land almost weekly. It might
Wow.
just be a couple acres here and there, but yeah, I think last week closed on 1,200 acres.
My gosh, that's impressive.
Areas. Yeah, so we are able to do a lot, which I feel very grateful for.
That's incredible. So, are you guys just buying this land from funds that are donated, or what is that process like?
Yeah, good question. So we have a couple different programs for land acquisition. I'd say I'll give you three examples. One of them is, so 80% of the California desert is actually federal land. So it's owned by the Bureau of Land Management primarily, and then the National Park Service. There's three national parks in the desert, and then there are five military installations. So the federal government are our biggest partners because they own so much of the land. Well, we have one program that's funded through a foundation to buy in holdings inside national parks and wilderness areas. So I think people don't realize when a national park is created, they're often created around or including lots of private land. So one of our programs is to say inside Joshua Tree National Park, find private parcels that might have old mining lots or old, ranches or whatever it might be, clean them up, and then we convey them back to the Park Service to be managed as part of the greater park. So that program has been really successful, and we've been able to, I think, protect over 60,000 of the acres we've protected have been in holdings inside our national park and wilderness areas, so sort of shoring up the protection in those areas. And that's largely made possible by a federal program called the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a really wonderful program that allows our federal land managers to purchase and manage additional land. So that's one. I was like, told you I'd give you three. The other one is more straightforward. So we have a sort of high level conservation strategy for the region. And so we've gone through and identified areas throughout the California deserts that have the most ecological impact, right? So they might be springs and water, riparian areas. So there, believe it or not, there's a river in the Mojave Desert called the Mojave River that actually has above ground water year round, and these really beautiful, important corridors for wildlife. So we've worked really hard to acquire land in the Mojave River and protect that. There are also wildlife corridors throughout the desert that we've focused on acquiring land to make sure it's protected. And those corridors are sort of like the arteries connecting our great national parks, right? Or our military bases. So if you think of our national parks like organs in a body, the wildlife corridors are kind of like arteries connecting those organs so that they can function really well. So that kind of land, we do all kinds of things to acquire it. Sometimes it's private donations. Sometimes it's working with the state of California. Sometimes it's working with other foundations or NGOs that, will sort of pool resources to be able to acquire those lands. And then the third thing we do is sometimes we'll take conservation easements on land, which is kind of a boring topic in some ways, but it's basically a legal easement on land so that the land in perpetuity can only be used for conservation. And the state of California and the federal government have systems where if, say, the habitat of an endangered species is destroyed, whoever destroyed it has to mitigate for that loss by putting conservation easements on other land so that it's held in perpetuity. So we'll occasionally put conservation easements on land as part of that mitigation process. It's a riveting topic, these different ways of protecting land, but super effective. And so we cobble all these different tools together to achieve our mission and work towards building this, connected desert in the end.
As far as connecting those conservation easements and habitat corridors in more sensitive regions, what does it look like when those conservation easements are protected? Are you looking for biodiversity enhancement, protecting things like the desert tortoise? Where do the flora and fauna benefit when these easements are created?
Yeah, great question. Well, I would say not just the conservation easements, but anytime we acquire land and protect it in perpetuity, there's a lot that goes with that, right? A lot of people think about, you know, the actual land acquisition, but there's a great responsibility to maintaining a piece of land in perpetuity, right? And we really try to think about not just managing the fence lines or managing it as a parcel, right? We really are trying to think about this land as a living entity,
I
right?
love
So,
that.
and it's something we like to talk a lot about here is that the desert is sort of dismissed or not recognized as a thriving biodiverse place. But the reality is that it's actually one of the more biodiverse regions that we have on our planet. It's filled with all kinds of plants and animals, many of which that live nowhere else on the planet. They're endemic to right here, right? And this is kind of the ecosystem is this living, breathing organism in and of itself. And so when we acquire a piece of property, we honor it in that way, and we try to think about it in that way. So it might mean looking at the biodiversity that's there, seeing if there are rare plants on the property or endangered species like desert tortoises or Mojave ground squirrels on the property, and making sure that we're managing it in line with the needs of those species. Of course, we have communities that live in or around or on these lands, and helping people have the resources they need to know how to, sustainably interact with the land is another piece of that.
I love that you also are working not only for the animals and plants and biodiversity there, but also with the people and, offering that educational component as well as some resources. Because it's going to go a long way, especially if that's the community that's living there, and chances are they want to protect it too. So I love that.
Yeah, I think that's something that I really like to underscore is that in the past, the conservation movement has really had, I shouldn't even just say the conservation movement, but just sort of the dominant culture right now is, this separation between people and nature, right? And we've often, in the conservation movement, protected nature as this separate thing, and we need to fence it off from people and maintain it for itself. And I think we're really pushing on that narrative and understanding more as a culture that actually people are the key to conservation. That bringing people into these spaces and healing the connections between people and nature is really powerful. And it's something we're experimenting with is rather than establishing preserves that exclude people, that actually establishing preserves that include communities. Is a way more powerful tool because I think in the end, people are actually the key to conservation working, right? It's empowering our communities to be a part of that work. I think is actually the way, the path to success here. So we're always thinking about ways to be better about that.
Yeah, I love that.
And how do you involve community initiatives in the mission of MDLT? What does that look like on the ground? How are you including Indigenous voices, locals in the high desert area? How is that central to the Mojave Desert Land Trust mission?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we really involve people in everything that we do. So I'm trying to think of a couple examples, but the thing that just is top of mind right now because we just had our really successful community plant sale.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. You should congratulate Patrick for executing for executing that.
You'll have to tell us more
Yeah.
about it, Patrick.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say maybe I'll pass it to Patrick. Do you want to talk a little bit about the plant sale and how that involves our local community and what that means for the Joshua Tree area?
Yeah, thanks. So the plant sale is like our primary is the plant conservation program opportunity to engage with the public, allow them to contribute to conservation of our ecosystem, not on like public or protected lands, but on in their own home landscapes. And it's a program we've had since 2016. We started providing plants to the native community, and there was huge interest straight away. And every year since, we've really leveled up in the amount of plants we've provided, as well as the interest and excitement from the community that we've garnered. This year, we opened doors at 9 a.m. and there were people lined up at 5 a.m.
Oh
to
my gosh. Wow,
to
that's crazy. I love
yeah.
that.
'Cause we're growing like almost 100 different species that people can't get anywhere else. Our community is really interested in the native flora, and they want to do more than just like the most common or the most showy native plants, because they understand that a diverse flora supports diverse pollinators, diverse wildlife, and supports diverse communities. So they're really excited about that. We also involve the community in volunteer capacity. Our program relies heavily on volunteers, and we have a really amazing group of dedicated folks. Some are here every week, multiple times a week. Others come occasionally. We do bi-weekly seed cleaning events where we have volunteers come in, get their hands on some of the native seeds that we've collected either from our lands or from our grounds here at headquarters, to help us do the work, to see the plants, to learn about the ecology. And they help all the way from cleaning through propagating plants in the nursery. And we also get some extra dedicated folks who join us in the field for seed collection.
Fun.
And a lot of desert seeds are dispersing and available during the harshest time of year. So our crew is extremely committed, going all summer out in the field collecting seeds, and we have a group of volunteers that join us with that work as well.
So the time of year to gather these seeds is just the dead of summer, huh?
It is all year.
Oh, it's all
But
year.
a lot
Okay.
of it is in the heat of summer too. Yeah. We'll start our season starts when we come back from the new year. We start scouting our properties to see what populations, like what size, like if there's large enough populations to collect seeds from, which ones are available this year, track their phenology, and that quickly turns into seed collecting, often in March or April, and that continues on through December, when a lot of our perennial shrubs are flowering and dispersing seeds.
And so with this plant sale and just like getting the community involved, like are you guys selling just the seeds, or is it plants themselves that you've kind of grown from these seeds? And are there kind of like landscaping guides for their own home? I know that, and we talk about it a lot on the podcast, there's like a lot of initiative of like kill your lawn, make plant native species in your lawn. Is there some sort of like guidance that you guys provide for, people's own personal landscapes?
Yeah, we provide seed packets year round, and we grow plants for our plant sale, which is once a year. It just happened, usually in the end of October. And we provide resources on our website for selecting plants for different garden types. So if you have a rescued tortoise, or you want to support pollinators, or you like hummingbirds, we have guides for selecting the appropriate plants for that, as well as just general plant maintenance once you get them in your landscape, because we've grown them in our nursery where we're watering them fairly regularly. And that is sometimes a challenge for folks to get native plants straight in their yard and understand the watering schedule that's required for that first year or two.
So, as a botanist and living in this desert landscape, what is your favorite native plant?
Can't say. I can't pick one. That's
Okay,
crazy.
top couple that you love,
I
and
really love
why you love them.
I really love Castanheas, the paintbrushes. They are hemiparasitic, so they tap into the roots of hardy perennial shrubs to get some extra moisture and nutrients while during the hottest, driest part of the year. So in the middle of summer, you'll find these bright red flushes, stalks of paintbrush flowering when everything else looks really dry and crispy. So it adds that splash of color when there's nothing there, that resource for pollinators and wildlife, and it doesn't harm the host plant really because they're tapped in and they're most of the times they're deciduous. They've dropped their leaves, so they're not really, the host plants aren't really losing a lot of water during that time, except for to the Castanea. And of course, I love Joshua trees. They are, the iconic species that has been, captivating our attention and creativity for millennia, centuries, from Mary Austin in the early 1900s through us now.
And what are some interesting fun facts that you could give our audience?
The Joshua tree is really interesting for a number of reasons. It has this really mysterious, poorly understood arbuscular fungal network that people are just starting to research, which is potentially a way for trees to, I don't like to use communicate, but like send signals to neighboring trees because they're all kind of connected. Joshua trees require a single pollinator, the yucca moth, to pollinate their flowers and produce fruit and seed every year or each year when they do flower. And the two different species of Joshua trees have different species of moths that are
I did not know
specific
that.
to them. Yeah, they do. There is a little hybrid zone where they overlap, but for the most part, the eastern and western Joshua tree have their own pollinator. And they're a mass species, so they don't flower every year. They usually are just vegetative until the right conditions are met, usually a wetter winter that spurs them to flower and then produce seed, and enough seed to tolerate the heavy granivory seed predation from ground squirrels and other rodents, so that there's enough seeds available to resupply the next generation. Interestingly, this year we had some pretty heavy rains in September, and I've seen eastern Joshua trees, western Joshua trees, and Mojave yuccas all flowering from these anomalous conditions where normally they don't.
It's a nice fall surprise.
Yeah.
Love that.
Help with those drought conditions. Kelly, do you have a favorite plant, or like maybe favorite's not the word to use, but kind of like a spark plant? Like in birding, I'm an ornithologist and desert tortoise biologist, but when I got into birding, we would pick like a spark bird, like the bird that got you into birding. Is there like a plant that got you into botanizing through your desert tortoise research prior to, getting started with MDLT?
That is a great question. I also side with Patrick that that's a very difficult question, but I have a kind of nerdy answer.
Let's hear it.
This is a nerd out safe space, so
I have always really loved the buckwheat family, which is Polygonaceae, and they're partly called that, polygon AC because the way that they arrange their leaves is very geometric. And I've just always loved the way that they look. It's very sort of almost, at least some of the species. Are you guys familiar with Eriogonum inflatum, the desert trumpet? And it
Yes,
has
I love the
these
desert
really
trumpet.
kind of bubbly stalks that are filled with air, and at the top they have these sort of branched, I don't know, little branches and these little tiny flowers at the edges, but they're arranged perfectly symmetrically. And I think it's just like a cool way to sort of see math displayed in nature. This is how were always one of my favorites.
A truly nerdy response. I love it. I love
Yeah,
the desert trumpet too.
I know. In fact, Patrick, people were asking me at the plant sale if we would ever sell them. Have we ever thought about, have we ever tried to grow them?
I think we have grown them in the past. They're short-lived. We try to stick with perennials, but there's a couple new Eriogonums that I want to try. But there's a chicken and the egg question with the Eriogonum inflatum. Because if you take that inflated stem, pretty much every time if you open one up, there's a little larva inside of it. And so the
Oh,
question is it a gall? Is it a response to that insect, or does it inflate on its own, and that's why the insect lays its egg there?
I had
Ooh,
no idea. See, this is what's
that's
so fun
cool.
working at MDLT is I can ask Patrick a question like that. What kind of larva is it? What's it?
I
What
don't
is
know.
it? Okay, we
I
got to
don't know.
figure it out.
That's fascinating. You could have a
Fascinating.
whole research hypothesis or thesis on that.
Okay, we need to talk about that later.
So, does the desert candle fall into the same family as the desert trumpet? No.
And
No.
what is the desert candle?
That would have to be my favorite desert plant, or not my favorite, but it just the desert candle and desert trumpet both have that inflated component to their look.
Oh.
And so I kind of are they in the same family?
The candle is Cassalaea, right, Patrick? Wait, what genus is
It's
that?
Brassicaceae.
Can we define the perennial and then I don't know what else you said?
Annual, perennial versus annual. Yeah.
Well, no, there were some other words that you guys said that I'm like, I am the non-scientist here, so
Yeah,
Yeah,
when I'm
so
in the field with botanists and you guys start dropping a ton of scientific names, I like started to pick up on it, but botany's not my specialty, so that's why I'm asking if the desert candle is part of the desert trumpet family.
I don't know. Well, to answer Coral's question, so perennials exist year round and annuals just come up once a year and they're alive for a short time and then they die off. Is that a good way of describing that?
Yes.
yeah.
So I forgot. So Patrick, desert trumpets are annuals. Are they
Or
annuals?
biennial, yeah. They can
Okay.
they can sometimes live for a couple of years. It's a really hard uh, differentiation. Usually, we refer to plants as either annual, biennial, or perennial. Biennial meaning they live 2 years,
Oh,
and then senesce or die. But in the right conditions or different conditions, some species will live shorter or longer, depending on those conditions. One reason is because being an annual plant is kind of an adaptation to dealing with drought. It's basically allowing that species or that individual to avoid drought by completing its life cycle within that short period of window, that short period of time when there is moisture on the desert landscape. So there's winter rains, those seeds germinate, they flower and go to seed before it really dries out too hard. So they're able to just avoid the drought conditions altogether. And so some species, if you provide them sufficient water, they can live a little bit longer.
I just wanted to underscore some of this because I think this is something that makes the desert so special. I mean, that system of annuals happens everywhere, right? But I think it's particularly evident in the desert where it's such harsh conditions, and literally every species that lives there has adapted to life on the edge, right? It's living in this marginal ecosystem with very harsh conditions. And, sometimes in the spring, it will boil over with species blooming, right? These super blooms that we get. And there are some plants that are only emerge for a couple weeks or even a couple days every several years. Like what an extraordinary kind of lesson in resilience, right? These seeds live in the seed bank waiting for the perfect conditions, and they can survive for years and years like that until the perfect conditions, and they'll bloom. And they might be these tiny, minuscule little flowers that no one notices. But it took them years to get to this moment of being able to bloom. I just think it's so beautiful, and it's so unique to this landscape that's so special.
And
That's
we
such a
have summer
hopeful
annuals
take.
too that are able to do that, have that really quick lifespan in the harshest conditions in the middle of summer, as long as they have a little bit of moisture. This year we had chinchweed, Pectus puposa, just highlighter yellow across huge swaths of the desert for a couple of weeks because we got just enough rain, allowed them to germinate and flower, and they've senesced and set their seed already. And they're able to do that in 100, 110 degree temperatures, even though they're only a couple inches tall and right next to the hottest surface, the soil.
Have you found as a botanist and, studying these plants in this ecosystem, like, is it easy for you to predict these blooms, or is it kind of a surprise to you too of seeing what pops up each year?
In advance, it's really hard. We know that it's looking like another La Nina year, which is generally a drier winter for us. So we can predict that it's unlikely to be a very productive plant year next year. But as long as it rains a sufficient amount, you're pretty much guaranteed to get some flush of green, if not annual plant flower show.
Nice.
And how does climate change exacerbate these already harsh conditions in the Mojave Desert for the flora and fauna communities? What are you seeing in the field when you go out there and you're surveying these easements? And have you noticed any impacts from these extreme weather events?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic because our flora has evolved for thousands of years in these really harsh conditions. They can tolerate our normal desert summers really well. But still it's a challenge. And when they're getting pushed for closer and closer to that edge. And a lot of the time, the impact that you see is on recruitment or germination of the next generation. And so that's one of the bigger concerns for Joshua trees, is that adults can generally tolerate multiple years of drought. But it seems like we're not getting nearly as much recruitment of young individuals. And so the population is just getting older and older. And the places where we're seeing more recruitment is at those higher elevations where we're predicting Joshua tree refugia, or the portions of their range where they'll persist into the future. And so it affects, seed germination and seedling survival. It affects the wildlife. Again, they're really well adapted to, especially like the fossorial, the ground dwelling rodents, kangaroo rats. They don't need any surface water, but they get all their metabolic water from the seeds that they eat. So if there's multiple years where the plants aren't producing seeds, they don't have a food or water resource. And so that really threatens their persistence into the future as well.
So we're seeing a cascading effects that when plants aren't able to grow to a reproductive size where they're producing seeds, it impacts things like Mojave ground squirrel or other fossorial animals.
Yeah, the plants are the foundational component of the ecosystem, and without plants, you don't have food and shelter for other plants and wildlife. It's also a threat to the human value of the desert flora. You know, there's significant cultural importance of desert plants for indigenous communities that have lived with these species for thousands of years. They inspire us now, and you know that just that beauty is missing when we get these multiple years of really droughty conditions.
Absolutely. And can one of you speak to the Joshua Tree Conservation Coalition and what that looks like for protecting species like the iconic Joshua tree from climate change threats?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So, just a little to add on a little bit to what Patrick was just saying, it is sort of saying that what changes climate change is making on the ecosystem is difficult in the desert because it is already such a harsh environment. And yet, if you spend some time in the West Mojave that is now, undergone decades of drought, you can really see the Joshua trees starting to die off. And if you're familiar with the desert tortoise populations in that area, I mean, numbers of desert tortoises are continuing to decline, despite a lot of the effort we've put into protecting them, and it's largely happening in the West Mojave again. I think 80% of the decline of desert tortoises can be attributed to this one region, and it's because of this extreme prolonged drought that's occurring there that is unprecedented. In
And
that
Kelly,
sense.
when you say the Western Mojave, what region, like, is there a town that you can identify so our listeners can kind of get a better idea of like what part of Southern California you're talking about?
Yeah, like towards the Palmdale, Lancaster area.
Sure.
That
Okay.
way, yeah.
Thank
Good
you for,
question.
yeah, painting that picture. I know that there's some really robust Joshua tree populations there as well, or there used to be like the tallest Joshua tree ever recorded was found in Lancaster, along with like a huge creosote bush as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. So there's at once some of the most dense Joshua tree woodlands there. And also in some of the lower elevations, that's where you can really see if you drive on Highway 58 between Barstow and Lancaster or Palmdale, you'll really see these Joshua trees that are just struggling. And
Interesting, I see.
that's because, so Joshua trees have been around since the Ice Age, and they were originally much more prevalent. Their range was much bigger. It was throughout Southern California and into Arizona, and so their range has already contracted quite a bit just because of natural warming, right? And so what we're seeing, however, that happened over 20,000 years, this contracting of their range. What we're seeing is just in 100 years that, there's been models that show in Joshua Tree National Park, for example, that only 2% of suitable habitat will remain in the next 100 years, based on the expected climate models moving forward. So we're talking about a near extinction event very quickly because of the rapidly changing climate. So because of that, because of that science that's come out, and because of the importance of this species on our landscape that Patrick was speaking to and you two are speaking to, it's really not only an iconic species for the Mojave, right? It's probably the most recognized species that people know what's in the desert, right? It's also a keystone species for the ecosystem. So because it's this big tree, it's the only kind of bigger, it's not a real tree, but this tree-like yucca that lives on the landscape. Lots of things rely on it for survival. Dozens of species require Joshua trees for survival, from birds and rodents and insects. So, it's a very important species. So when we started learning how threatened it is by specifically the changing climate and what we expect to see with the changing climate, we knew at MDLT we wanted to think about what could we do to help promote its conservation. And so we started two initiatives. One was we banded together with our partners. So both federal partners from the Park Service and the BLM and the USGS and the Fish and Wildlife Service and the state of California Fish and Wildlife partners and tribally led organization partners and other NGOs and scientists. We kind of all banded together to form the Joshua Tree Conservation Coalition. And the idea behind this coalition is very specific. And it's to build a unified, collaborative path towards looking at a conservation path for Joshua trees. And it may seem obvious that a group would come together like that, but that's not always the way it works with some of our most imperiled species. We have federal regulations, we have state regulations, we have NGOs that own land, we have tribes that have historically largely been excluded from these conversations at all. And so we really wanted to try to do things differently and come together and have all of these voices and spend time together trying to map out a strategy. And the coalition is relatively new. We just formed it last year. And especially just as of very recently with the federal shutdown, it's been a little bit on hold. With the reduction in force with our federal partners has been really hard because most of our coalition are federal partners. But the idea is that we will agree on kind of a set of best practices for how to manage Joshua Tree woodlands. We'll agree on, the research priorities. What do we not know that we need to know to be able to solve this problem moving forward? So I'm really excited about that initiative moving forward. And then the second initiative that we put forward was, I mentioned that the threat that we know about Joshua trees is coming from these climate models. They're telling us that in the future, there won't be as much suitable habitat. Well, the issue there is that we actually don't have much on the ground data to show what's happening with the Joshua trees right now. Right? We have anecdotal evidence and there's some research happening here and there. So what this coalition helped realize was that what we really need is a range-wide demographic monitoring study. And so that basically means we need a study where we're just deciphering the health of every population of Joshua tree in California. And that setting up study plots that we can look at, come back to every couple of years to see over time how the trees are doing. So we've also started this new research initiative. So just in the last year, we've been establishing these study plots throughout California to really get to the bottom of which populations are doing okay and which ones are struggling, and then being able to monitor them over time.
That's fascinating. And how exciting that you
It
get to
is
be the first ones to
exciting.
kind of pioneer this method.
Yeah, yeah. And I should say that partnership is with the scientists at the USGS are, developing that study and carrying it out.
Okay.
Yeah. But It is exciting. They've been doing it in smaller scale and on Park Service lands and that kind of thing. But this is the first time we'll get really comprehensive data so that we can show definitively, like, okay, here's what's happening. So I'm so thrilled about that.
Right,
Congratulations.
getting to the root of the issue, it sounds like. And I love this holistic approach with bringing everyone to the table. Like everyone deserves a seat at the table, right? And it sounds like that's kind of your mantra with this coalition, which I love, like bringing all these different, organizations, government, tribes to be able to speak their piece, and ideas of how to protect this land. And, it's interesting to hear you speak about it and that just your natural take on it is, it sounds intuitive, but like that it hasn't really happened like that in the past. And so maybe that this can be kind of a precedent for others to follow. And I understand, yeah, the government shutdown doesn't really help anything. Hopefully by the time that this comes out, it will be up and running again and you guys will have some better answers there.
Yeah, that's the hope. But it is exciting. It's exciting to be coming together around a species that we're just starting to realize needs help or will need help in the future and trying to be more proactive about it. It's the unfortunate thing about some of our policy, like the Endangered Species Act. It's written to come in at the 11th hour and try and save a species that's going to go extinct, and it's much better to start early on, when you have a chance to really think about what you can do and what kind of protections you can put in place more proactively.
So how does the Mojave Desert Land Trust, as well as this coalition, kind of work with scientists on the ground like Patrick? Do you guys also work with wildlife biologists? And, how is that playing into all of this?
Yeah, it's a great question and one of my favorites because it illuminates the secret key to successful conservation,
I'm
which
dying
is
to know.
which is deep, deep, strong collaborations with networks of partners. And that's really important to us. We're an entity, but we cannot do everything. And there are lots of other entities out there that are doing really great stuff that overlaps with our work. In fact, you've interviewed several of them on your show, right? So Tim Shields is a partner to us and a mentor and
Big
really
mentor.
wonderful, really wonderful scientist and conservationist for the desert. And I talk to him often. Maybe it's informally, just to collaborate on ideas. And you spoke to the Cactus and Cloud folks, Cindy and Colin Barrows, and they're doing really incredible work, right? And we partnered with them and many other groups with the Chuckwalla National Monument Campaign.
That's right.
And I think it's really important to know what we can do and what role we play, and to really work to support and uplift all of the other partners that are working to protect the desert in one way or another. We don't do a lot of research in-house, and we've kind of made a decision not to do that because we can partner with universities, we can partner with agencies, with scientists. And so often if we have a big research question, we'll look to partnerships with outside researchers to see how we can find a path to getting the information we need that's helpful not just to MDLT, but to our whole community.
And when you're collecting data about these Joshua trees and the overall health of them under this umbrella of the coalition, are you working with, out of curiosity, certain scientists like Todd Eskew with the USGS?
Yes.
Cool.
So it's exactly, it's actually Todd's study.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. I was wondering. I had worked under him back in 2022 for the USGS when they were still working on Fort Irwin. And he had mentioned doing this Joshua Tree like suitability model. And I was fascinated by it because I love GIS and like mapping. And they said they were going to do this like big mapping component. And I'm curious like what that looks like collecting that actual data. Are you guys in the field with them, going to these, woodland forest sites where there's dense Joshua trees, or how does that look like?
Yeah, good question. So Todd is one of the foremost experts on Joshua trees and has done many
Yes.
studies on mapping habitat suitability and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's who we're partnering with to do this demographic study. And then we have hired an outside consultant to do all the field data collection.
Ah.
Yeah, so there's a
Oh,
group of field biologists out doing collecting the
I'm
data.
trying to remember. He's another like OG tortoise biologist, right? I'm forgetting his name. I've met him before though, and I think he mentioned that he has been consulting with MDLT since its like conception.
Oh, interesting.
What's his Ed LaRue? Ed LaRue.
Oh yeah, Ed
Yes.
does desert tortoise work with
Oh,
us.
okay, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so there it's in many ways it's a small world, right? This
Yes.
group of really incredible desert ecologists, and we all sort of work together in different capacities. And so I was a desert tortoise biologist, I think Natalie, like you are now,
Yes.
for a very long time before I started this role. So I definitely lean on those partnerships quite a bit now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually was listening to your interview earlier about your beginnings as a desert tortoise biologist, and it resonated a lot with me, especially your first encounter with the tortoise where you had walked up and it was coming out of its burrow. I had a
Yeah.
similar story where it was March. I hadn't seen any tortoises yet. And then sure enough, there's one
Oh, that's
sunbathing.
amazing. It's such a magical moment. They're such little
Yes,
magical
they
creatures.
are. And like you, I kind of became interested in rare plants while I was doing, after I'd done Fort Irwin research, I still am doing a lot of monitoring. And so naturally fall into looking at the only other thing around when tortoises aren't, above the ground. So
Yeah.
yeah, I felt a lot of inspiration hearing your story. It's great. And you too, Patrick. I love your beginnings from loving the shrub step up in the PNW and falling in love with the Southwest. It's hard not to.
Yeah, you can't have those amazing, iconic desert critters without the plants that they rely on. Got so many times seeing tortoises just stuffing their faces with desert dandelion in the spring, or Gila monsters hanging out in the mottled shade of a black brush when it's just blazing sun and hot all around. And then you don't see those rare reclusive critters very often while you're doing that work. So you get really familiar with the plants that they rely on and that are thriving when all the wildlife is hiding away underground.
Totally. And I really love your holistic approach, Kelly, that you were talking about earlier with, our separation from nature. There is no separation. And so when we look at it holistically as this living, you know, breathing ecosystem where plants and animals are interconnected, then we can really begin to see the importance of plants for animals to thrive. And then, the circle of life continues that way. And so I think it's great to like get excited about wildlife biology. That's what got me into doing desert tortoise research. But then I became like obsessed with the plants. Like anytime I saw a beaver tail blooming or like echinocactus polycephalus, I freaked out the first time I saw that big pink barrel cactus. I was like, this
Yeah.
is so cool.
So in terms of preservation, can you guys explain, just exact, I mean, I know you guys have this plant sale and this connection with the community, but can you explain the importance of a seed bank and like what exactly that is and how that's a part of like a preservation effort as well?
Yeah, so there's the natural soil seed bank where the native plants disperse their seeds. They lay dormant on the soil surface, waiting for ideal conditions, and then they germinate and they grow and repeat that cycle. And that life cycle is, has evolved to these conditions. It's really resilient. But with the level of threats and the new threats kind of piling on top of each other, a lot of these life cycle components are under threat. So what we're doing at the Mojave Desert Seed Bank is trying to conserve the entire flora of the California desert through seed banking of conservation collections. So we interrupt that natural seed cycle for a small subset of the available seeds from a year, and we'll bring it back, clean up those seeds to separate out the chaff, the inert non-seed material from the seeds, store them under refrigerated conditions. And so in those conditions, we have a living repository of all the plants across the desert is the goal. Right now, we have over 330 different species from primarily our properties. And so those seeds are alive in our storage conditions. We reduce the temperature, so it reduces their metabolic rate, so they stay alive for extended periods of time so that we can then put them back on the landscape when a disturbance happens. If a population gets wiped out, we can reintroduce it. We can provide material for research. And while they're in storage in the seed bank, we do germination tests regularly. So we monitor their viability, how they're handling our conditions, and making sure that they're still alive, because the worst thing that we could do is store seeds and they just die in storage. So we keep a close eye on them, and if they're reaching the end of their lifespan, we'll find a restoration project for them to go back out, or we'll grow a new generation from those seeds, collect that, and then repeat the cycle. But we primarily are working to conserve those for as long as they stay alive, but we're also working to provide plant material for restoration work. And so these conservation collections from across the desert can then be grown out at a commercial scale, so that we take this small collection. We're really careful when we do collect seeds from our lands that we're not collecting more than 10% of the seeds that are produced in a year. And so that's leaving enough seeds to regenerate that population, as well as provide resources for all the critters that rely on them. And then so they're ready, they're available to distribute to restoration projects when there's a large fire, when a solar farm is decommissioned, if there's a unauthorized road cut through one of our properties, or whatever we need to use them for.
That's great. I love that you guys have just like this stock of these important native species that you can rely on for those moments of, for instance, natural disasters and these other things that come into play, that, like you were saying, with the solar and then, just people unfortunately making not great decisions on public and private land.
It's a really valuable resource, because restoration in arid environments is really hard. Like, you have to if you're going to broadcast seed, you have to send out a ton of seeds. If you're going to do plants, you have to maintain them over time. And so there's two main components to successful restoration, and that's having the right plants for the right place. And so by collecting seeds from across the landscape, from all these different microclimates, we have plants that have evolved to slightly different conditions, and then getting those plants on the landscape at the right time, usually as short of a lag after disturbance, is really important. There's invasive grasses, annual grasses, that are really just filling up the whole matrix, the understory of the desert. and they'll come back really quickly after a fire and outcompete anything you seed. So if you have that material ready to go, you can get it out on the landscape straight away, so that it has a better chance and is not outcompeted. If you give the invasive grasses a head start, they're
Take
gonna be
over.
really difficult to deal with.
I see. So the timing is important for all of
Yeah,
this.
so having that material ready to go is really, really valuable.
Let's say a fire comes through part of the Mojave, which is unfortunately not uncommon. In these last several years, we've seen things like, was it the York fire, the sheep fire, all of these unnatural fires that have, been exasperated by things like invasive grasses and nitrogen deposit on the soil of the desert. What role do these seed banks play during times of natural disaster? Are you getting like Joshua tree saplings on the ground right away afterwards? And what does that survival look like for these saplings once they've been restored across a burned landscape?
Well, so I think I'd start off by talking about the natural seedlings and what comes back up after a fire. And so these ecosystems are not adapted to fire.
Thank you
And
for
so
specifying
his,
that.
yeah, so historically, before invasive grasses kind of came in and filled in all the inner spaces, there's shrubs that are fairly spaced out. So if a lightning strike causes a fire, historically it wouldn't spread very far and cause a lot of damage. And so the plants in that ecosystem didn't evolve to be resistant to the fire. Like they're not able to tolerate it very well and resprout like a lot of forest species are. And their seeds aren't evolved to handle that high temperature in the soil seed bank. So a lot of times now with these increased fuels from the fires, they disturb these huge areas, and then the natural recovery is really pretty slow. There's a couple pioneering species that do come back. Sometimes Joshua trees can survive and resprout. Desert globe mallow often comes back fairly quickly.
I did not know that.
But yeah, not many others. Yeah, so if there's a big fire, a lot of times there will be globe mallow coming back, but that's a pretty short-lived 2-4 year perennial. And so it's not really like a long-term solution to that ecosystem. So having our plant material available to go back out is really important. We provide that material to people that are doing restoration work, but we've done mostly small scale restoration work on ours and partner lands. And so when you put seeds back out, you really rely on the natural precipitation cycle to get those going. And so if you time it right, then you can have pretty decent success. But if those rains just don't come for whatever reason, then restoration in arid lands can be quite challenging.
Again, it has to be very condition based for these saplings to ultimately grow and thrive, to recruit those younger generations to grow older. So my question to you guys is, how can we make this practical? What can our listeners do to help protect Joshua trees and really support some of your ongoing campaigns with MDLT?
Always the question about how folks can get involved. I'd say a few things. To start, we've underscored today a lot about how desert ecosystems work, and they're really miraculous and incredible for a lot of reasons. And I think, we always kind of talk about having, as a conservation organization, we have this we have this hurdle we have to overcome, which is even for people to understand that there's stuff that lives here that's worth protecting, right?
That's
So
the
the
main
more,
point. It's just to get people to understand this place, right?
yeah, like just to realize this is not emptiness. It's not a wasteland. It's a thriving, I say this all the time, it's like this incredible, thriving biodiverse wonderland filled with species that are incredibly unique, like the desert tortoise, like the Joshua tree, and countless others. And so just the more people we have being an ambassador for this place and talking about it, and especially in times of threat, calling your local elected officials and saying, hey, what about this? Are you thinking about this? Are you thinking about this place and the importance of protecting nature? And I don't want to get too sidetracked on it, but
Being an
I think,
advocate,
yeah,
essentially. Yes.
exactly, being an advocate. And we, especially right now, because there have been so many threats to our mission and what we do. Not, we already have this existential climate threat, right? And so we need to have sort of swift solutions to that, right? Not just for the desert, but for our planet and for people. But also because, like I mentioned, so much of our area is public lands, which are under threat right now as well, to be sold off or opened up for development, helping us through some of our we now have a lot of advocacy initiatives that people can join onto and sign on to, and it really makes a difference. I cannot say that enough. Like signing those petitions, doing what you can, it really makes a difference that like this is real. We have the support of our communities, and it's important for us as people. So that's a big one. And then I think, well, maybe I'll stop there and give it to Patrick and see what he would say. Put him on the spot.
Join us. Come volunteer. Help us do the work. We're always looking to engage our community, get them out on our lands, either doing stewardship activities, picking up trash, reclaiming places, doing vertical mulching, repairing, installing fences, join the seed lab, come collect some seeds with us. And yeah, just learn about the conservation issues facing the desert. Talk to friends and family, join advocacy campaigns. It's a lot of these issues are really big. And like the Joshua Tree Conservation Coalition, we're bringing experts together in our public policy and advocacy work. We're bringing communities together to voice support for conserving these lands, these places that are, not just pretty, but they're where we live. They're the ecosystem that we rely on as well. And without it surviving, I struggle to see how we do.
And where can people get involved with these efforts, and how can they find out more about, advocating and volunteering?
So we have a really awesome social media platform, so you should follow us.
You do. I love your Instagram page. I really
Yeah,
do.
so primarily through Instagram. We put everything on Instagram. So from our advocacy work to how to volunteer to our events to anything and everything, learning more about the desert. So certainly follow us there. And then if you are local and you want to help through volunteering, you can go to our website and there's pretty clear instructions there. And I'm not shy to say helping us by donating is probably, really the most impactful thing you can do. And we're coming up here on Giving Tuesday, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And so, like all nonprofits, we do the bulk of our fundraising in the last 2 months of the year.
I
And
see.
the amount of money that we're able to bring in during that end of year campaign dictates what we're going to be able to do next year. And really, every dollar counts. And we have matching donors. We have lots of people that are looking at how much money we're able to fundraise to figure out, how much they'll be able to give us to complement that. So I'm not shy to say, please donate to us anytime, but in the next couple of months, that'll really set us up for success next year to make sure that we can continue all these initiatives moving forward.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for all of the time that you spent with us today and educating us on the desert and seed banks and all of the things. I definitely am walking away learning so much. So I know our audience definitely appreciates it.
Yeah, well, it was such a pleasure. I know it's my favorite thing to do to talk about how awesome the desert is
Me
and all
too.
the work we're doing and how cool, talk about our favorite plants. I could do it all day long. So thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks. It was a great conversation.
Before we say goodbye, is there any sort of like environmental quote or inspiring thing that you kind of live by or that gets you through each day to continue this work that you can leave our audience with?
What do you got, Patrick?
All right, so I really like, as an ecologist and somebody that just wants to know as much as I can about the environment that we live in. I also understand that I'm never going to understand it fully, and that doesn't matter because the ecosystem as a whole has been functioning, supporting plants and people for millennia. And so I think this Aldo Leopold quote, usually just referred to as the intelligent tinkerer, is a really good one. It's, if the land mechanism as a whole is good, then every part is good, whether we understand it or not. If the biota in the course of eons has built something we like but do not understand, then who but a fool would discard seemingly useless parts? To keep every cog in wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering. And so I just like to think of that as like, we rely on this ecosystem, and every little piece that we disturb, that we mess up, can cause unknown ramifications. So we do our best to understand it. But also, one of the best things we can do is let it be.
I love that. I'll just add, I think that's so beautiful that I think working in conservation, we're really lucky because, I think we all hear really, really terrible news all the time, right? It feels like everything is falling apart. And that's because we're not being told about all of the really good things that are happening with the same fervor that we're being told about all the terrible things. And I was lucky enough to go to New York Climate Week a few weeks ago.
Cool. You went?
I did.
Ooh,
Awesome.
good for you.
Highly recommended. But it was, really this international summit on what we're doing to fight climate change. And I'd never gone before and I didn't really know what to expect. And I listened to all kinds of talks from these like grassroots groups in Rwanda and Ecuador and
Wow.
Colombia that are working to save their little communities or this rare zebra or this,
It's
and all over
incredible.
the planet, to hearing the Prime Minister of Australia talk about what they're doing and the President of the Marshall Islands about what they're doing and what they're up against. And my overall takeaway was that our entire planet understands what's at stake. And there are literal hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are innovating and thinking and rallying to protect this planet. And we don't hear about it. We hear about almost none of that because it's happening in these little ways. And, I think MDLT is part of that story, right? Like, I love that in our little corner of the world, like, we're rallying to protect this really incredible ecosystem. And I'm so proud of that. And it was just so wonderful to see that we're part of this much bigger story that just felt so inspiring and real, and it's happening. So I would leave you with that.
Thank you,
We're not
Kelly.
alone. Yeah, we're not alone. There are a lot of people working towards the same thing.
That was so beautifully said.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I needed to hear that too.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
And I mean, that's what this podcast is about too, is to try to take the doomsday out of climate change and just share stories of people that are making a difference. And, like, there are people out there, and, we're starting in Southern California, but we have the whole world to go to share those stories.
Yeah.
And it's really stories that inspire action on a local level for that global impact. And that's the whole reason I became a biologist to begin with, is because I was inspired by the stories of my professor in college. And I thought, I want to fight extinction too. And so when you share these emotive stories, it inspires people in like a unique way where they feel compelled to do the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we tabled at an event in New York that was like a green jobs board. And it's just a
Cool.
place for young people to come and learn about what work was. And I have to say, I talked to dozens, if not hundreds, of young people trying to figure out how to build a career to help the planet. And I mean, if you're ever feeling distressed, like, just sit and listen to what people, a 21-year-old is hoping to do with their life. I mean, it's really extraordinary. So I love that.
That's what this podcast was founded on too.
I know.
Just
I
really
love it
wanting
so
to make a
much.
difference.
Yeah, I really appreciate both of you and for telling
Yeah.
those stories. I think it's so powerful and so needed because we don't get to hear these stories enough. So I appreciate it.
No, we don't. And it was really birthed out of spending a lot of time in the field and in nature, as you both
Hmm.
know, being a desert tortoise biologist, you spend a lot of time alone connecting with the landscape. And so you just feel like compelled to share that knowledge. Like, I was like, why is no one talking about the desert? What the
Hmm.
Joshua tree is going up in flames. This was back in 2020 before it was even listed as a candidate species. And I was in the field and people were tagging it, flagging it off from being bulldozed. I'm like, this is the iconic Joshua tree that everyone knows and loves, and no one is talking about how it's on the edge of extinction. So, anyways, it's
Yes, but
exciting
you
that these
are.
stories can
It's
come up.
so exciting. Keep doing it.
Yeah. And Kelly, I have to ask one last thing before we go. Were you lucky enough to see Jane Goodall speak at New York Climate Week?
No, I don't think she was
Oh,
there this year. I think she spoke last
okay.
year.
I was under the impression she was there this year or like part of it in some way. And maybe she spoke like once,
She
but
was probably at something I did not have the pleasure of being invited to.
yeah, that's also a good point.
It was very sad I never got to see her speak. But what an inspiration.
I know, and she believed a lot in the youth too. So I thought that was really nice what you said about all of these people coming up to the Green Jobs Board and like having so many ideas, and she really believed in like inspiring, with Roots and Shoots, her youth empowerment program, about how to, yeah, harness that energy for change. And I feel like we're doing that with this story, with MDLT, Planet People. We're all working towards a bigger picture. So rest assured that, there's hope in that.
Yeah, love it.
Well, thank you guys so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you. And we'll hope we get to meet again one day.
We will. I'm sure we will. We'll come to the next plant sale.
Yeah, there
Nice.
you go.
We will have lots of new plants for you.
I can't wait.
Anxiety into action.
Bum, bum, bum.
Kind of like a doomsday.
A little bit, but it's like turning that doom into hope. So,
Yeah. We'll have to figure out like a fun.
A little intro outro
Yeah,
song or something.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be funny. I'm thinking of like Pink Panther, like doo-doo, 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 doo-doo. Something funny like that.
Well, I think the anxiety into action for this episode is a fun one. If you love plants, then we always encourage native plant species in your backyard, in your home space, in your community. If you have a community garden, maybe look into bringing some native plants into your community garden. I think that's a great idea. And going
That's
to the plant
nice.
sale that they do every single year in the fall. So put that on your calendars, figure out when it is. If you're visiting, if you're out of town and visiting around that time, it'd be a good time to see if you can be a part of the plant sale. And they always need volunteers as well.
Yes, their plant sale is in Joshua Tree, but it's an annual ordeal. And from this episode, you'll know like how big of a deal it is and that it's a special event. So if you're willing to volunteer and help out, that's a great antidote to anxiety. Or just, yeah, go and buy your own plants and see what happens in your backyard when you plant them. I will say that this is perfect because the Kill Your Lawn movement has been so widespread as like a really active wildlife campaign in the last couple of years. And if you're listening and haven't heard of the Kill Your Lawn movement, well, this is a great anxiety into action because it focuses so much on restoring biodiversity in your backyard by planting native and killing that green lawn, right? We talked about that in Kurt's episode a lot, so I won't go too much into it. If you listen to that episode, that was middle of December that came out. So if you're interested in learning more, you can take action by checking out our last episode with Kurt and finishing our episode with MTLT today.
Yeah. I don't have a lawn that I own, but I just remember growing up with my parents' lawn, and it was just such a pain to get the grass to be green, stay green, and like growing all year round. So I love
Very water
this.
intensive.
Yeah, I love this initiative to like really step into the native species. And I'm looking at my neighbor's backyard right now, and she has so many native species, and it's just like this beautiful butterfly garden. I mean, there's no
Your
grass
whole
anywhere on it.
neighborhood,
Yeah, it's really nice.
your
It's
whole
so
neighborhood
nice.
is blooming
Yeah,
always.
it's
There are native plants
beautiful.
everywhere in your
It's just like
neighborhood.
so much more pleasant to walk around and see all the different native species, the flowers. It doesn't always have to be this like flat grass that's boring.
I don't think anyone in
Get
your
out of here
neighborhood
with
has
that.
a lawn.
I saw actually, and I don't know where, it always differs geographically, like where you are, but I saw this campaign for, or I guess advertisement really, for chamomile lawns. And I'm like, that is amazing because then you just have tea all the time. I mean, like
I love chamomile.
who wouldn't want a chamomile
Oh my
lawn? Sounds
God.
perfect to me.
I have not heard of that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was my first time hearing it. I saw it last night and I was like, if I had a yard,
We're
depending on
linking
where I
that
lived,
in anxiety into action.
yeah.
We're linking that.
And also, if you have a chamomile lawn, that'll help with anxiety.
Perfect. Drink
Yes.
more tea, be less anxious,
Yeah.
and do a little meditation while you're out there in that chamomile lawn.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
hopefully this inspires you to plant native, listen to this episode, and make sure you check out MTLT ASAP because they just have the coolest plant sale. Like, love this org, love everything they're doing. Definitely support them and take that action to, reduce some of that anxiety. There's people out here doing the work. Go meet them.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Planet People. We are thrilled to have you as part of our community of wildlifers who care about protecting the planet for future generations to enjoy.
We hope that by listening, you feel inspired to connect with nature and become a steward of the planet by getting involved and taking action with your local community conservation organizations. Until next time, stay positive, Planet People.
This episode was produced by Natalie Jean Sybil, Coral Carson, and Hugh Carr. Directed and edited by Coral Carson. Theme song by Hugh Carr under the artist name Flama. Thank you, team.